Now, here was something interesting. And again, guys, I have to give Matt Smith the recognition for most of these records and different things that he's researched. This is not something Sheila and I did. This come from, and a lot of people out there is helping us with different information. We do appreciate you. In reference, O'Neill Moffett, petition for restoration of rights of citizenship. Now, guys, I'm going to read this, and then we're going to go down and read something Mike Elum wrote, and you guys compare your notes, somewhat like this person that had contacted the TBI about something else, and they said, well, if you ain't got no proof, quit bothering us, basically. If you ain't got no evidence against Buford Pusser, if everything you got's exculpatory, you can go somewhere else. We don't care about that. But it's funny that this person had basically the same thing. In fact, they had more because they had researched and done some research for somebody writing a book or something. She had the same information that the two women had, that their mother and their aunt was out in the parking lot at 4 o'clock in the morning. It may have been hearsay, but it was hearsay in the opposite direction. It was hearsay in favor of something that might be exculpatory to Buford Pusser, but they didn't care about that. But they went and interviewed the other two women that had wanted to badmouth Buford. It's not hard to see, and hopefully one day it'll be in court and somebody will get it pointed out better than what I can. Comes your petitioner, O'Neill Moffett, pursuant Tennessee, case number, petitions this honorable court for restoration of his rights of citizenship, and in support of same would show unto the court as follows. Your petitioner, a resident of McNairy County, Tennessee, was indicted in October of '63 in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Florida, sitting at Pensacola for the offense of theft of property of the United States of value of more than $100 under 2 counts, the same being docketed as number so-and-so, all violations in Title 18. The plea of guilty to your petitioner was accepted by the court and was sentenced to 5 years probation, was imposed by the court. You know, he stole 8 M1 rifles and 46 shotguns, according to one article I read. That's what was taken. Now, Mike Elum said, oh, they was just disposing of the weapons, and he thought it was okay for him to take them. But again, that's number 2. The petitioner has completed the service of the sentence of probation, and the maximum period of imprisonment for the crime for which he was indicted has expired. The petitioner has since that time of the aforementioned conviction, has conducted himself as a person honestly, respectfully, veracity, and in generally esteemed as such by his neighbors. Well, we've done a video where he broke probation and was actually sentenced and served time in Rayford, Florida State Penitentiary. First job I had after I got out of the Marine Corps in Jacksonville, Florida. I worked at Rayford, Florida State Prison. And that's where he was incarcerated because him and somebody else had committed a burglary, if I'm not mistaken, had robbed something else. And so his probation was violated and he was sentenced to serve actual time. Your petitioner would further show that notices of this petition has been served upon the Honorable Paul G. Summers, Jr., Attorney General for the 6th Judicial District by mailing a copy. Now, guys, the funny thing about this is where O'Neill Moffett's attorney has filed for him to have his rights restored. Considered petitioner respectfully praised that he be allowed to file this petition in honorable court. Upon expiration of waiting period, petitioner restored. Upon expiration of the waiting period of 10 days, as required by law, your petitioner be restored by order of this court to all the rights, privileges. Now, this is from his attorney, And he's asking for, and he prays for that his rights be restored. We could find nothing as of the video, making of this video. Matthew Smith couldn't find anything where that was ever imposed, where O'Neill Moffett was ever given his rights to carry a firearm, that his rights be restored, and to vote or anything else. So that's where we're at on that. Like, as Mike Elum would say, and that's that. But Buford Pusser, the other story, December the 6th, 2022, Buford and O'Neill Moffett. As many of you already know, O'Neill Moffett was the son of Buford's chief deputy, Jim Moffett. O'Neill was born August the 13th, 1943. I tell you this so that you will understand that O'Neill was a young adult when Buford was elected sheriff of McNairy County. In fact, he and Buford were only 5 years apart in age. Okay, that's good. O'Neill was serving in the Air Force when Buford became chief of police in Adamsville. They were friends. Now that you know this, here is more to their story. I have told you the story after Louise Hathcock's death. Mike Elum will never go 5 paragraphs without bringing up Louise Hathcock. And he does that in honor of Dennis Hathcock. He does that to keep Dennis happy because Dennis feels like he's exonerating Louise Hathcock and her conduct and his father's conduct, W.O. Hathcock, back in that day. And guys, you can put lipstick on a pig, but you've still got a pig in the end. I'm not talking necessarily, I'm using that as an example of you can't make somebody that was a hoodlum and a robber and a thief and a scoundrel and a murderer. She killed her husband. You can't make somebody like that come out here looking like. I have told you the story after Louise Hathcock's death, how Jim Moffett came home and was apparently upset about this manner in which Louise had been killed. Now here's first of all, here I have told you the story. This is a story, guys. He's telling a story. I have told you the story, and I've told you many times because I believe in this thing called illusionary truth, where if I tell you something enough times, you're going to start believing that it's the truth. And that's how Mike Elum has his followers. But he says that Jim Moffett came home and he was upset about the manner in which Louise was killed. Now, we have heard Peatie Plunk in a taped interview talk about Louise being drunk. We've even seen Louise's autopsy, where her blood alcohol was what, a 0.28? I think it was a 0.28. I could be wrong. This was when he told his wife, Dorothy. Now, nobody else has ever heard this story, but now he is telling Dorothy and his son O'Neill, who was on leave from the Air Force, if anything ever happens to me, you don't have to look no further than Buford Pusser. Why would Buford Pusser's best friend, his chief deputy for all those years, and he goes home and tells his wife that if anything happens to him, to make sure they look no further than Buford Pusser. That's what you call spoken into history, guys. That's what you call spoken into history, because you're not going to see anything Mike Elum has where he has O'Neill Moffett on tape, or he has, what was Jim's wife's name here? Do you remember? Dorothy. He don't have Dorothy on tape. He don't have O'Neill Moffett. He don't have signed statements from them. You know, that's such a strong statement. You would think that Mike Elum would have said, hey, hold on, guys. Hey, Dorothy, can I get you to sign this for me? Hey, O'Neill, can you sign this and put that in writing? See, guys, this story didn't come out till later on after O'Neill Moffett had died. I don't have that in front of me, but this is 2022. Guess what? O'Neill Moffett's dead. When Mike Elum comes out with this story, O'Neill was already dead. I honestly have no idea if Jim shared any information with his family. Now, he done made that statement up there, but he says, I honestly have no idea if Jim shared this information with his family about what happened when Buford shot and killed Louise. What it does appear to tell us is that Jim shared any information, is that Jim was looking over his shoulder as he knew something about Hathcock's death, a version that Buford did not want anyone to know. Guys, that right there is spoken into history. Jim was looking over his shoulder about Hathcock's death. Hathcock's death, how much more could it be investigated? How much more? Don't think that the TBI, don't think that the Highway Patrol, don't think there was other agencies that was there. There was an autopsy done on Louise. There was a bullet removed from the post out front. Peatie Plunk even says that. But all of a sudden, after Moffett's dead, we're going to say something about Hathcock's death, that version that Buford didn't want to come out. Mike Elum says, I've tried to understand why Jim made such a statement, and this is the only thing that makes sense, especially if you view the autopsy report. I've tried to understand why Jim made such a statement. Guys, illusionary truths, say it enough till you believe it. I've tried to understand why Jim made such a statement. How do we know Jim ever made a statement like that? There's nothing in writing. There's nothing signed by Jim. There's not a tape recording by Jim, O'Neill, Dorothy. This is spoken into history. But see how Mike keeps talking about it, and he's telling you this like a magician. I've tried to understand why Jim made such a statement. Guys, Jim never made such a statement. There's no proof Jim ever made a statement like that. Now, you can believe that if you want. You can believe what Mike Elum's telling you, but he's speaking that into history to you. He's putting that in your mind and letting you think, I don't know why he would make that statement neither. And you're sitting there thinking, and you're taking that as the truth. That's not the truth, guys. Mike Elum is a very, very cunning person in my book, in my opinion. Showed us what two people in the living area of motel office would say, that they heard Louise begging for her life. Mike Elum just said that Louise was in there begging for her life. Peatie Plunk says that she cussed them from the time they got there, that she was cussing at them. He'd never heard a woman use such vulgar language as she did. And she asked him, what are you looking at? And smarting off to him, she was intoxicated. Her own blood alcohol, a 28, a 20 BAC, blood alcohol content. This woman was, what is it, a 0.08 now? 3 times, 4 times the legal limit, intoxicated. Can you just imagine a woman and she's intoxicated to the point of, did Jim Moffett know that Buford's story about the shooting was a complete lie? Quite possibly. He asked there in a question, did Jim Moffett know that Buford's story about the shooting was a complete lie? Quite possibly. Guys, did he know that the story was a lie? Quite possibly. Quite possibly, Jim Moffett was there. Jim Moffett was on the scene along with Peatie Plunk. They had gone together to serve an arrest warrant on Louise Hathcock that day. Now it's time to talk about O'Neill and Buford. O'Neill was in the Air Force at the time when they were upgrading their firearms from M1s to M16s. The Air Force was upgrading their firearms from M1s to M16s. Guys, we didn't go from M1 rifles to M16s. M16s didn't come out till the Vietnam War. We went from an M1 rifle to an M14. An M14. So along with other things, that may be minute to some of you, to a military person. You can tell Mike Elum wasn't in the military. That would be something any military person would know on the order of the weapons that's been advanced throughout the years from the military. O'Neill would tell me that he and a friend on a detail that was responsible for gathering all the obsolete M1s for what they were told was disposal. Oh, they're going to throw them away, guys. Mike Elum says that O'Neill said they're going to throw them away. Guys, right here's your clue. O'Neill would tell me. Mike Elum says he would tell him. Now, O'Neill was alive for a while, and Mike Elum did talk to O'Neill, but he didn't tape. He doesn't have a tape recorder of O'Neill telling him that they were going to throw these guns away, so we just thought we'd take a few of them. The military just come out and say, hey, guys, we're going to dispose of these guns. We're going to throw them away. It doesn't matter. Theft's theft. Mike Elum can tell you things all day long. It doesn't make it true, and that's what he does there. He's trying to fill in the gap. Now it's time to talk about O'Neill and Buford. Okay, that was the same one from the other page. Let's move on down. I'm trying to rush. I don't like to rush because it makes us... O'Neill would tell me that a friend were on a detail and gathering the M1s was told to disposal. For O'Neill and friend, they seemed like it was a terrible waste of the firearms. Oh, they were going to throw these firearms away, and they just felt that it was a terrible waste. So after some discussion, the two young men didn't see a problem with keeping some of the guns since they thought the weapons were going to be disposed of and destroyed. Don't matter. If something don't belong to you, don't matter what somebody's going to do with it, it's not yours. But it's not about O'Neill. This story is not about O'Neill Moffett. That's what Mike Elum wants you to think. Mike Elum's trying to point everybody's attention in that direction, but that's not what it's about. Now O'Neill didn't tell me how they managed to acquire so many of these rifles. Oh, he didn't tell them nothing like that. He told them all this other stuff, but he didn't tell them how But he said that they were successful in keeping a good number of carbines. Well, they kept eight carbines, 46 shotguns. And he and his friend brought them back home to McNairy County. Who was this friend? Was he from McNairy County, or was he from somewhere else? You had two guys in the military. They happened to be stationed together, and both of them happened to be from McNairy County. Now, I've got that guy's name somewhere in the articles where they were sentenced, but I don't think he was from McNairy County. So anyway, Buford bought one for himself. He bought one of the guns for himself, and he said to be selling several others that he acquired from O'Neill and his friend. He bought one for himself, and it was said that he was selling some of them to others. Everything is said, guys. Have you ever noticed Mike Elum? Everything that he talks about is, this person said this person said that. Okay, where is this? Can we go talk to O'Neill Moffett? Oh, no, he died. And after these people died, that's when Mike Elum, Dewana, all these people, Mike just says anything he wants. And nobody's ever called his hand on it. Now, as this happened, some of the Air Force bean counters discovered that several of the guns had turned up missing. We know all that. They come after Moffett. Started a chain of possession investigation involving the FBI in order to find the weapons and who had taken them. The two young men thought they were headed to prison as they just knew they were caught. Okay. O'Neill, unsure of what to do, talked to Buford and told him of the mess they were in. O'Neill would tell me that the next thing he knew, he and Buford was in Buford's car and headed towards TBI office in Jackson. Why would you go to the TBI office in Jackson? You might have went to the FBI office in Jackson because that's who's doing the investigation. The FBI, it said earlier, was investigating the theft of the guns and federal equipment, federal firearm. That's who would be doing it. But he says they're in Buford's car and headed toward, okay, Buford's going to go try to help them out. Let's go turn this stuff in, son. Let's make it right. O'Neill went on to, Buford's going to take them and get it all taken care of for them, but Buford's going to still keep a stolen gun from the military. O'Neill went on to tell me, right there, guys, that is your key right there. Went on to tell me. Somebody told me. They told me that Buford drove like a bat out of the bad place. Wow. That's really, it makes him guilty of killing his wife, because you'll hear Mike Elum talk all the time. He drove fast. Everywhere he went, he drove. He was always driving fast. Everybody knew he drove fast. He drove like a bat out of, wow. Don't make him a murderer of his wife. I drove fast when I was a kid. I drove back and forth to school every day, and these people would call my mom and dad, and by the time I get home from school, my dad say, "Give me your keys." And I say, "What's wrong, Dad?" He say, "Mary Webb called. She said you was a flying. Said you come on that curve sideways." I said, "Dad, she just don't like me. She just don't like me." No, she was telling the truth. But people tend to not tell the truth when they get in trouble. As they traveled from Adamsville to Jackson, often wondering if they would get there alive. O'Neill Moffett was wondering if they'd even get to Jackson alive because Buford was driving so fast. O'Neill had nothing complimentary to say about Buford's driving habits. And that's a problem, Mike? And that's a issue that makes that man guilty of killing his wife? That really puts a black mark against him. Really? I have no idea what transpired in that meeting. Well, he should have, shouldn't he? You'd think he would have what transpired if O'Neill's telling him, Buford took me to Jackson. We met with I'd say they met with the FBI, but he says TBI. Mike does. He makes it up as he goes. Maybe there's a record of that. Maybe Mike can show us a record. They sure can't show us a record of 67 when the ambush took place. This is 1964, so I kind of doubt that too. But anyway, O'Neill was indicted October the 24th, 1964, on one count of theft of United States property valued at more than $100. Yeah, I'd say so. He appeared in federal court in Florida. One count he's indicted for. I have no idea what transpired in that meeting. Okay, we know that part. That's where some of this stuff has overlapped when I've copied it. O'Neill was apparently remorseful. Yeah, I'd say so. Everybody's remorseful when they get caught. Everybody's sorry when they do something wrong and then they get caught for it, and then he was remorseful. He was so remorseful that after he got on probation for that and was out free, him and somebody else committed a burglary, and they had to go back and serve time at Florida State Prison. So he didn't learn his lesson from that, don't appear. And he made a plea of guilty to the charges. He received 5 years probation. 5 years probation. O'Neill's friend faced the same charges under a different docket, receiving the same sentence as O'Neill. I would be remiss if I failed to mention that O'Neill is said to have had served his tour of duty with the Air Force honorably. Guys, if you think that you served and you stole guns from the military and you received an honorable discharge, please, I wish Mike would have posted it here, honorable discharge, because it says in his obituary, served honorably. Well, and I have nothing against the Moffetts. The Moffetts is, people's kids do things, and Jim Moffett and Buford may have been great friends, and Buford was probably trying to help his friend's son out. But this man did not serve honorably. If you're stealing 46 shotguns and 8 M1 rifles from the United States Air Force. You're not serving honorably in my book. That's my opinion. He worked to get his record expunged. Now, Mike Elum says, now is he speaking this into history because we can't find it? Is he speaking expunged? He worked to get his record expunged like his father worked for the McNairy County Sheriff's Department. We know that he worked for the McNairy County Sheriff's Department for Buford later in life, but that didn't mean nothing in the 60s. That didn't mean nothing about being a convicted felon or anything else. If the sheriff wanted to do something like that, you could do it. And worked as an investigator under James Opal Gray. I was thinking he worked under Buford too, but it could just be this guy. But he says his record was expunged. Any of you out there find that? Can anybody find that? Because we can't. We can't find anything that says that. I think this story shows just how far Buford would go to get his friends, help his friends. Okay. And that's a bad thing. And that's a bad thing that Buford was good to his friends or tried to help friends. Was that Buford was a politician? Buford, does that make Buford bad? 1 minute, he's mad at Buford because he don't get along with nobody. He says he don't. But yet he gets elected all 3 terms that he was allowed to run. He gets elected every time he runs, which is in some ways considered a good thing. Buford could have allowed things to take its natural course. It's also worth mentioning that O'Neill is said to have served his tour of duty with the Air Force and was honorably discharged. See, guys, it's also been mentioned. O'Neill is said, right there, guys, is said to have served his tour of duty with the Air Force and was honorably discharged. Was said to have served his tour of duty with the Air Force and was honorably discharged. Well, Freedom of Information Act would show us that. I don't think we have to. It didn't say honorably discharged in his obituary. It just said served honorably. There's a difference. Family can write served honorably, but you can't write honorably discharged without an honorable discharge. It's also worth mentioning that Buford faced no charges. Now, guys, let's look right here. Let's look how he spoke this into history right here. He says, friends, which was a good thing, Buford could have allowed it to take its natural course. It's also worth mentioning that Buford faced no charges for his Lord have mercy, participation in selling the guns, something that may not have been disclosed to investigators looking into the thefts. Buford faced no charges. Buford faced no charges because there was nothing proven. Buford wasn't in the military. Buford didn't. Except for Mike Elum's comments, except for him speaking in the history that Buford had bought at least one gun from O'Neill Moffett. We don't have a tape from O'Neill. We don't have a signed statement from O'Neill. There's nothing whatsoever that supports what Mike Elum is speaking into history, and O'Neill Moffett is dead, so we can't go check with O'Neill Moffett. That'd be like me saying, when Mike Elum dies, that would be like me saying that Mike Elum and Ricky Plunk together done this or done that, or it'd be like me saying that, and Mike Elum's dead, and he can't say nothing. He can't comment on it because he's deceased. Why does people not realize that what Mike Elum is doing here, and why does Mike Elum not realize that really, in the end, this could happen to him? He'll never know it, but in the end, he may go down in history as one of the biggest, who knows? I hope not. I hope people respect him more than he has Buford Pusser, but I have a feeling, because I've talked to different people, I do have to wonder, however, if the .30 caliber carbine Buford initially bought from O'Neill for himself could have been the one used a few years later to kill Pauline Pusser. I do have to wonder. I do have to wonder, guys, if that gun that Buford Pusser bought from O'Neill Moffett a few years earlier, where do we have a sales receipt? Where do we have a tape? Where do we have anything at all other than Mike Elum speaking this into history years later? Mike Elum talked to O'Neill Moffett before he died. He talked to him and interviewed him. Do we have anything on tape where O'Neill Moffett is saying this? Do we have anything written and signed where O'Neill Moffett says this? Or is this something after O'Neill Moffett died that Mike Elum, because this is 2022. I know this is part 2, and if you haven't seen part 1, this statement here, this post that Mike Elum's making is in 2022. Moffett's been dead for many years. I must point out that it seems a little strange that Buford's gun went missing about the time of the alleged ambush. Really? Really? Where's that at? Is there a stolen gun report? Is there anything other than somebody that's wrote up a paper and acting like it's a statement of somebody's, not signed, not on TBI letterhead, not on, just on a sheet of paper, somewhat like I did when I went and got 1960s typewriter font and wrote a imaginary statement up showing how easy it was to do. But it's even easier to do if you started doing this stuff 10 or 15, 20 years ago and you just went out at the flea market and bought you an old 1960s typewriter. And you write these so-called statements up and put whatever you want in them. And then, isn't it funny that the whole file is missing? Nobody's got the Buford Pusser file, but all of a sudden these statements of Buford Pusser, these statements of Jim Moffett start showing up, and you think, wow, how'd that happen? They've lost the whole file, but we've... Guys, use your imagination, because that's what Mike Elum did. It's what Mike Elum did, in my opinion. I must point out that it's a little strange that Buford's gun went missing about the time of the alleged ambush. We put it in many videos, guys, where Buford Pusser actually went to TBI agent Sloan and said, if you would you take my gun and test it? All these rumors going around. Warren Jones had all these rumors going around about Buford. So he goes to the TBI and says, here's my gun, just test it to make sure. And back then, they actually had the casings. They actually had the casings and the projectiles that they found on the ambush site, and they could compare to. And when they compared, they come back and said, no, it's not a match. Buford Pusser's M1 is not a match. Mike Elum says here, written in the history in 2022, that Buford Pusser's gun come up missing after the ambush. That's funny, because in their report, they say themselves that they tested the gun and it came back not the gun that was involved in the ambush. Mike Elum goes on to say it was because it was used in her murder or because it was stolen federal property. That's the gun. I'm currently looking into that particular gun and trying to get the TBI to perform ballistics. That's what he's talking about, that gun that him and Ricky Plunk's went out and shot. Now, if nothing else, we know the gun was stolen. Ricky Plunk confirms that the gun was one of the guns stolen from O'Neill Moffett. Now, O'Neill Moffett was friends with Ricky Plunk, grew up with Ricky Plunk, and or O'Neill Moffett and Peatie Plunk knew each other, and Peatie Plunk couldn't have just got the gun straight from O'Neill. I believe that's the gun. I do believe that gun has got involvement in the ambush, but I don't think it was Buford Pusser. I think somebody too bad to Peatie Plunk. Ricky Plunk really done his father a disservice when he went to Mike Elum rather than going to the TBI or the FBI or the ATF. He really done his father a disservice, because I used to look at Peatie Plunk as a honorable as I did Jim Moffett. I don't do that no more, because Ricky Plunk, and Mike Elum goes on to say that Peatie Plunk had even sold photographs from a crime scene for $500 one time. If a police officer will do one crime, he'll do another. That's the old saying, a person's past often predicts their future. Look at a person's past, and you can see the point of life, the direction in life that they're headed. Tennessee has some strange laws. More specifically of interest to me is one which a case that's in public view. TBI is telling me Pauline's case is sealed and can't be opened. Well, it may be sealed because it's an open case. Any open case wouldn't be open to the public. But saying that it requires a court order, I think what they're talking about on a court order is getting Pauline Pusser exhumed. I think that's where he's trying to put two stories together. This case is an open case. It's never been closed. They can open this case at any time they want. Now, if they need a court order, that's probably to exhume Pauline's body to compare it to the gun. They also say the investigation into the alleged ambush is still open case, as it was never solved. And I would agree with that. I would agree. The case has never been solved, so it's probably open. Comments, Mike. Photographs, legal documents showing that O'Neill Moffett was petitioning for full restoration of citizenship rights after serving. That's right. It shows that. It shows that O'Neill Moffett, that's in part one, shows that O'Neill Moffett's attorney had filed the necessary papers asking for his civil rights to be restored, where he could vote and carry a gun and so forth like that. We've never found anything where that was honored. And guys, that's the other part. That's where this last person I'm talking about had contacted the TBI trying to give them information. The only thing is, it was more exculpatory toward Buford than something talking bad or about Buford or pointing something in a bad direction. It doesn't matter if it's hearsay or rumors. They'll put that in their report. But he tells this person, do you have anything evidentiary information, either directly or indirectly, related to this case that you can wish to provide? If so, please contact me directly. If not, thank you for your time. Bye. Leave us alone. Because that person had already said that she had some social media contact, with dealing with Dennis Hathcock, and a statement that he had made and had questions about it. Did they go talk to Dennis Hathcock about it? Did they investigate what Dennis Hathcock was doing out there following Buford Pusser around the night before? Did they investigate Dennis Hathcock's father, W.O., possibly owning a blue Cadillac? You know, a lot of questions here. A lot of questions. Guys, thanks for joining me. Catch you on the next one.